Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum class. Welcome to English grade 8. Students, today we will talk about plot development, and for plot we have different stages. Let's read our learning outcome today. I hope students that with the previous lessons you are clear about what is the difference between story and a plot. A story is basically series of events, but when we are organizing it from start to finish in a very organizing way, we call it plot. So today we will learn that what are these different stages that we find in a plot of a story. The learning outcome says that we have to identify and analyze the stages of plot development in a fiction text. It can be in a story in the form of a short story or a novella, short novel, etc. We will talk about all these different stages: exposition, setting, climax, character development, resolution. Now, here in the learning outcome, your story elements are mixed up with the plot, the stages of plot, but we will only talk about the stages of plot. They are the beginning, exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and then the resolution or denouncement. So we will specifically talk about the stages of plot. Here goes your vertical linkage, and as you can see over here, this is actually the graphical representation, a mountain diagram of a plot, stages of plot. First, every story that you read, dear students, you know that there is a beginning, there is a starting point of the story where you are introduced with everything. Then you have an action. An action is anything happening which is very meaningful in the story that rises. Now this action, the very first action which rises the story towards the middle or the climax. And then we have some actions, they are falling actions that are resolving the story and the end we are ending the story with a resolution of different conflicts. So these are basically all these stages, these 5 stages that you can find in every fictional text that you read. In order to analyze the plot of any story, you can just point out and talk about all these different points that you can find in a story. Obviously, you have to read all of it to apply these different stages on that story to present your analysis. Let's talk about these different kinds of plot. Number 1 is your exposition. At this stage, at the very beginning, you introduce your characters. The main characters, protagonist or antagonist, they are actually introduced. Establish the setting and begin to introduce the primary conflict or problem of your story. So this is the first part. The setting will also be established. Setting includes your time, place, weather, the year, or the period that includes the story, on which the story is based. For example, if the story is based in a school, then the setting of the story will be in a school or at home. So you can introduce all these settings in your exposition. Then number 2, we have our rising action. The rising action normally begins with an inciting incident. Something happens or a moment that sets your story into action. As it progresses, you will have multiple moments of conflict. There will be some problems with the good or bad forces or with the main character, and that develop and create tension for the readers as the story moves toward the climax. So rising action is actually what is keeping you hooked as a reader. Then we move on to the climax, the middle part. The climax is actually the most important and the peak of tension, plot, and character in your story. It's the moment that your reader has been waiting for. Then you have the following section where time to start resolving problems or conflicts that the writer actually elevates in the story and subplots, so your story does not feel rushed in the last few chapters. This is also where any conflicts that arise as a result of the climax can start being resolved. So you actually start making grounds for your story to actually move on to the resolution. And finally, resolution is the end of your story, where you can tie up the final loose ends, answer all those unanswered things, and bring your story to its happy or tragic ending. Now, the ending can be happy, it can be a tragic or sad ending. Now, students, in every story you can find these stages, starting from exposition, then you will incite some action which will lead you to the climax, the highest point of the story. Then we start solving the issues and problems or the unanswered left questions, and then we move on to the ending of the story. So this way the plot is organized, and every story must be organized in a plot to tell it better as the writer wants to. Now that we are clear about all these different stages of plot, what we are supposed to do is we are to work in pairs and discuss the story according to its plot stages. You will talk about the start, the middle, and the end. Criticize the development of the plots and suggest what would have done better in the story. Now, if you were given a choice, how can you change the story? Would you like to change the start, the climax, end, or some rising or falling actions? Now it's time for you to work in pairs and focus on the story. You can read that again. We have read it in the previous lesson and talked about the main theme and central idea. Now, you can watch this simulation link to understand the different stages of plot, how do they work in a story, and how can you make a very interesting story for your readers. The worksheet is attached for your understanding, where you have to actually summarize the fictional text. All these resources are added for your understanding. You can get them in the description of the video, students. I hope that now you can perform the worksheet and also perform your classroom activity in pairs. Thank you so much. I hope that now we are clear about how a story works, what makes up a story, what is a plot, and how do you actually find out all these different stages in any story that you read. This was the basic purpose of the learning outcome. I hope that you enjoy it. I'll meet you in the next video lesson. Allah Hafiz.